I was going to say that I don't think that age is exactly a straight line for people who are not straight.
Uh-huh.
Like, we experience things at different points and in different orders, and especially coming out later in life, my age is complicated.
Welcome to the Coffeeshop AU. I'm Jay, your host. I am trans, non-binary, neurodivergent, and I currently live in Seoul, Korea. My pronouns are they, them, and I believe that queer folks like me deserve more safe spaces to tell our stories our way. And to do just that, my friend Embers is joining me today to talk about their experience of being a queer, non-binary parent and generally an all-around kind human being. Welcome, Embers. How are you?
Hi, Jay. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm drinking my Gentle Breeze Kanu capsule coffee, and it's delightful. I just bought a new coffee machine, and I'm really, really enjoying it. How are you? What are you drinking? And where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from Busan in South Korea. A little area called Myeongji from my apartment. And I am drinking a coffee as well, but I have an espresso machine, a very cheap espresso machine off of Coupang.
Coupang.
The Korean site for buying cheap things, reasonable things.
Yeah, it's basically like the Korean Amazon, and the prices are pretty competitive because there are quite a lot of companies selling the same products, right?
That's right. Sometimes you have good results and sometimes
Not
it's just okay.
so.
Not so great.
It's never been terrible. One time I got a toothpaste dispenser instead of a wardrobe, like a closet I ordered. So that was a little weird. But most of the time, it's quick, it's affordable, and you get what you ask for, usually.
Yeah, my worst experience was like a very cheap and cute wardrobe. I was like, I just wanted the cute looking thing. It arrived, it was possible to put it together, but it was weak enough that my cat could destroy it.
Oh no!
The outside was climbable for my cat, so it was not great. My cat Tigey knocked that whole thing over and tore
Tigey!
apart all the shelves. It didn't last long.
Oh, good job. You know, cats are like people, they're like natural disasters, right? And you accept that when you adopt cats, when you live with cats. But that's pretty impressive. So did you get a new one?
Yeah. I found some stuff that people left out by the trash that was still really good.
Thrifty.
Yeah, so I have some cupboard-looking things, and then I bought just a hanging rack off of Coupang.
Okay.
But it's not protected by anything, so if my cat decides to destroy my clothes, there's no protection.
There's no protection. Just like in life. We don't have protections in life. We're raw dogging it all the time.
I fully just looked that up last night, like what raw dog actually...
Really?
Yes, because I'd heard it many times, but I never really knew exactly what it was supposed to mean. I mean, the way you're using it is different from, obviously, the more sexual version of that.
Yes. I am referring to the sexual version, but it's an analogy, not the actual thing.
Of course.
The difference is that in the sexual context, that's a choice you can make, whereas in life, it's not always a choice, you know?
It's not really a choice. Or not an easy one anyway.
Yeah. So you are drinking this black coffee? You take your coffee black?
It is black coffee. Yeah, I do take my coffee black.
Me too.
Because I avoid drinking sugar. Because I am a diabetic.
Right. So I'm still a little like underinformed about the diabetic condition. Does that mean you can never eat sugar, or should you just avoid simple kind of processed sugars?
I don't have to avoid them,
Okay.
but if I do have processed sugars, it does shoot my blood sugar up pretty high pretty fast. I do still need carbohydrates. So the best way to balance is to try to know how many carbohydrates I'm eating at a given time so I know how much insulin to take to balance that. And if I don't know that, then I can take too much insulin and have low blood sugar. Or too much carbohydrates and too little insulin and go high.
Yeah.
Honestly, low blood sugar is the more dangerous of the two. High blood sugar is dangerous over a long period of time. Low blood sugar is dangerous immediately, but easy to fix.
Yeah.
You just need to get some sugar in you.
Oh, thank you for that explanation.
Yeah, that's something I've had to experience since I was 25.
Yeah.
And it's been a few years since I was 25.
Yes. Age, my favorite subject. But before we get into that, can you introduce yourself to us in your own words?
Of course. You gave me such a nice introduction, so I didn't feel the need. My name is Embers. I use they or she pronouns. And I have housemates. I live with a married couple right now, my good friend and her husband. I have one child. My child is, well, in Korea, people say that my child is 11. But more international age, she's 10. I am a little bit over 40, and I'm from the United States. My home state is Minnesota. Ethnicity, I guess I'm just pretty white. The most interesting thing in my blood is I have some Norwegian blood. My grandfather is from Norway originally, but he moved to the States when he was 8. So I don't know if he had that much memory of his time growing up, early years in Norway. He did not look like your stereotypical Norwegian, though.
What did it look like?
He was short and had dark hair.
Yeah, ancestry is always really fascinating. So does that mean you're used to the cold? Are you good with cold weather?
Well, yeah, Minnesota and maybe my Norwegian blood, both of those together, they do make me pretty good at handling cold.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So if you were to, relocate at some point to like a colder part of Korea or some other part of the globe, you would do okay.
Yeah, I think so. Whenever people talk about it being cold in Busan, I'm just like, no, it's really not.
It's really not. And
It's not cold at all.
And Busan is like a very southern city in Korea, so
Right.
it's usually quite
Right.
warm in comparison to other parts.
Right. Today is one of the coldest days I've experienced here. It's 7 below Celsius. Fahrenheit, I can't remember at all anymore, but that's maybe around 20 or 15 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, we can fact check that after.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Also, like, that's really specifically for the American audience.
Yep. I'm trying to do both.
Well, I've heard that it's a bit more intuitive to use the Fahrenheit once you get used to using the system, just because 100 degrees Fahrenheit is like about the temperature of the human body, right?
Yeah, it's 98.6.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Yeah, if you're talking from 0 to 100, then it's very intuitive once you
Right.
understand the scale.
It is nice at Celsius. 100 is boiling and 0 is freezing. That's pretty intuitive as well.
Yeah.
They both have their positives and negatives.
Yeah, just like everything. I forgot what we were talking about before I asked you to introduce yourself. Do you remember?
We talked about coffee and we talked about temperatures.
Yes, I think it was probably coffee. Just the fact that black coffee is just my favorite, especially when it's like smooth and like dark roast. It's amazing.
I do very much prefer dark coffee, black coffee as well.
Yeah, I have nothing against other types of caffeinated drinks, but the older I get, I think like the simpler my tastes become, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There is something about taste changing.
Yeah.
I have been on feminizing hormones for just a little bit more than 2 years.
Yay, congrats.
Thank you. And taste does change.
Oh yeah, it changes with GAHT as well, like, or, some other form of hormone therapy. I've been going through that as well, but, since this is your episode, I'm not going to hijack this conversation. I tend to definitely go into like long tangents about my experience.
Neither of us like talking at all.
I remember now what we're talking about, age. I'm so excited to talk about age and
yes.
aging, but it's all related to this, right? Your taste changing with age, but also with your hormone therapy on estrogen. So how has that changed your taste buds or taste in food, drinks, etc.?
The most notable thing that I can mention is taste in alcohol.
Oh.
When I first started on hormones, on estrogen, estradiol, and by the way, I've been doing injections the entire time.
Yeah.
So I do injections about once a week or once in 9 days now. And since I started, I stopped drinking for a while. I stopped drinking for a little bit more than 1 year for for health reasons, which was more related to my diabetes.
Yep.
And trying to control the balance. But when I started being able to hang out with people again, I drank a little bit more again, and I realized, oh, really beer doesn't taste that good anymore. Or certain kinds of beer really didn't taste good. Like, I used to be able to drink IPA or pale ale, and now it's just not pleasant. And unfortunately, the sweet drinks were the ones that actually taste better. But I shouldn't drink sweet drinks. I try to avoid them anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, the cocktails are what taste good, but I shouldn't drink that for my blood sugar.
Right.
So it's a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
I try to drink maybe 1 or 2 drinks when I do go out, but I shouldn't drink too much anyway.
Yeah.
Because that can affect blood sugar. But when I do, I don't like having IPAs or pale ales anymore. The other sense that I noticed that really changed is smell.
Right.
My ability to smell is much more sensitive than before.
Right. That's interesting. So has that worked in your favor or not really?
I think it's mostly not in my favor. It's not really a superpower that's a good thing to have.
Yeah.
Thank you, Estradiol. But that is something I wasn't expecting. And sometimes being around people who don't smell the best and just having to not notice that has not been pleasant.
Yeah.
Especially in small classrooms with middle school boys.
Oh!
It's not their fault, but...
It's not their fault.
It's not their fault,
but
it is difficult.
It can be...
difficult to stay there.
A lot. I remember when my brother was going through his puberty, and sometimes, you know, like I would get the sheets from his bed for the washing and stuff, and I just remember just going into his room. I remember that smell. And I remember the smells in the sheets. But he wouldn't know, though. My mom would be like, oh my God, you should shower before you go to school. And he's like, why?
Yeah, sometimes they do need to shower more. And sometimes it's just their bodies are changing. It's hard to know.
Yeah, no, I think it's both, right? Like, because your body is changing, it's giving off the scent. But if you can't smell it, you know, that might be like due to hormones too, differing levels of hormones.
Right.
Then you should shower more often, right? Unless you really don't care. And teenage boys, sometimes they have other things to occupy themselves with.
Right. They're not accustomed to needing to do that, and then there's other things to do. Yeah, there's other things to notice.
Yeah, exactly. I am on testosterone, and my tastes definitely have been changing, but it's been changing like in multiple stages. At the very beginning, I was really drawn to meat, and I'm somebody who hardly ever ate meat before, so like animal proteins and stuff for a while. And then now, a few months in, I'm becoming really attracted to like sweets, like how I used to be when I was, you know, a teenager the first time around. So sometimes I just have to order like this huge bag of just like sugary treats, and I'll just sit there and like stuff my face with them. And I'm like, oh man, I feel like I'm gonna die if I don't have this. As far as I know, I don't have diabetes, so I don't know what's going on, but I feel like it's starting to shift again, so it's all super interesting. And I was hoping that my sense of smell, I usually have a very sensitive sense of smell, I was hoping it would get less sensitive, because like you said, it's not fun to be super sensitive to smell like all the time. But I don't think that's changed a lot, actually, so I'm a little disappointed.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it's too bad. You're in your 40s.
And I have a 10-year-old child.
And you have a 10-year-old child. You're a parent. You're probably the first parent to a human child that we've had on the show. That's really interesting to me. You know, I met you as a parent, and it hadn't been that long since you came out as non-binary, and since you started your medical transitioning when I first met you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I think when you met me, I had been out for almost 2 years.
Oh, right.
But I had been on hormones for maybe 1 month at that point.
Oh, right.
Because there was a time where I was trying to allow my ex to have some time to process and to understand.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that didn't really happen, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, going through a lot of this kind of late.
Relatively.
It is easy to wish that it had happened earlier and like have regrets about that. Regrets that I didn't actually do that earlier.
Yeah.
But I think if I had gone through transition earlier, I wouldn't have an amazing child. So there's that. That's really the biggest thing that I can say for coming out later, I'm still trying to live, and I'm trying to live for myself.
Yeah.
But I have a child, and she is an amazing person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad she exists.
Yeah.
And that might not have been the case. I might not have had a child if I had transitioned earlier.
Yeah.
Or at least not with the person that I had a child with.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's not attracted to feminine people.
Yeah. So there's the whole coming out later or transitioning later in life, like hearing you share your experiences and watching you go through your journey as a parent. And as somebody who used to be in a marriage with a partner who had a different understanding of your gender identity, and just watching you make that shift was so new and informative and impressive to me. And yeah, that's basically why I wanted to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Because I think you are navigating through these things I just don't have in my life. And a lot of my friends don't have in their lives. Whether that's because they realized their queerness earlier in life or because they're just younger than me even, some of them. But it's also part of the queer experience. And I feel like it's not as common for me to hear about people's stories who do transition later in life. Like, I've heard of stories, but not people I know.
Right.
And, that firsthand experience of what it's actually like. Right. I just have to finish this thought, though. Do you think with age, your taste in things change?
What kind of taste?
Just in food or like anything? Or is it difficult to tell because, you're also on hormones?
That one's a little bit difficult to tell. Like, I just eat what's around me, and I have been trying to eat less animal protein, less meat, but I think that's more about Earth.
Yeah.
And what is affecting our planet. Not that one person can make a difference by eating less meat or not eating meat, but
it all starts with you.
I think
in
general, it is better.
Of course.
Yeah. But I guess I don't know. I've always liked to eat all kinds of food. I've never had any big things. I mean, if we do start talking about it, I can start thinking about things that I prefer to avoid.
Yeah.
But those things I don't think have changed either.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know.
One thing I prefer to avoid is ketchup.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. I hated ketchup when I was younger, but then I kind of, grew to be okay with it.
Right.
But I really didn't like it when I first tasted it. I was like, what is that? So aside from the avoidance of ketchup, your taste hasn't changed over time too much.
No, I don't think so. There's a few things in Korea where I prefer not having them, but if I have them, it's okay. Like the ones that people probably already will mention, garlic bread, sweet garlic bread.
Right. A lot of like foreign foods, especially Western foods, are quite a bit sweeter than you would find in other countries.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Everything's like sweeter, even chips and stuff, even snacks. But I don't know why that is though. I might do like a deep dive into it.
But I was going to say that I don't think that age is exactly a straight line for people who are not straight. Like, we experience things at different points and in different orders. And especially coming out later in life, my age is complicated. My feeling of hormones and transition is something like puberty.
Yeah.
And going through that later in life is a little bit strange, a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, I mostly enjoy it because it feels like a better thing and a better process than what happened the first time.
The first puberty.
But it's still something to go through.
Yeah. Even having to say that, the first time I went through puberty,
Right.
that's
The wrong
quite
puberty.
interesting.
Yes. And also, like, experiencing queer community and queer things for the first time and being almost like a baby queer, like a baby gay person.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
a newbie.
pansexual. Yeah.
Oh, wait, you're pan?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Or bi, whichever word works.
Because our labels are personal and we don't always talk about our orientations, really.
Right.
Because we're actually part of the same trans community in Korea.
Right.
And I don't feel like we necessarily feel the need to share our orientations, per se. I feel like we maybe talk a little bit more about our gender identities and things related to that.
Right.
So I didn't know that you identified as a pansexual. I thought you were bi.
Well, I don't feel a huge difference between the two necessarily.
For you, yeah.
Yeah, But pan sounds better, and the bisexual flag is the better flag. So I don't know. The pride flag for bi people, the colors are great.
Yeah, I'm actually not a huge fan of any of the queer flags except the trans one. Yes! I love the trans one. It's just pastel-y, you know, like I get sensory overload pretty easily, and some of the colors can seem a little harsh, a little too like high contrast, a bit intense, and they don't always go together in terms of aesthetically pleasing ways. Personally.
Yeah. I've not seen the pansexual one look very good ever.
It's so sad.
Sorry. Yeah, it's not my favorite flag. But
Yeah, I mean, we're allowed to have opinions.
yeah, bisexual and pansexual are almost synonymous.
These days, right? Yeah.
But pan sounds like many and bi sounds like two, so people get confused about that.
Pan is like everything.
Yeah, and bi can be as well.
Bi can be as well.
Bi is two or more.
Yeah. It's just how you define the label that you use within the communal context.
Right.
So, okay, that's awesome. I just got excited because I know like 2 pan people in real life. And then both of those people told me that you're the only pan person I've met in real life. So I'm always just excited to meet another person who identifies as pan.
Nice. I'm a baby to the community and experiencing those things.
Yeah.
And the nice part is it feels immediately welcoming. But at the same time, there are people who are in their 20s who have a lot more experience with their sexuality and gender than I do.
Yeah.
Like, I buried it for a long time. I was aware of a lot of it, but I didn't have the right words, or also I avoided thinking about it in some ways because of the community or the place that I was raised and the religion that I was raised in.
Yeah. You know, one time we had that get together with our trans group. Maybe this was like a year ago, 2 years ago. And we were all talking as a group, and it was really striking to me how many of us shared a religious background in our upbringing and how much trauma came about through that experience, which just makes sense, right?
I almost think that religion equals trauma, but I can't say that as a general statement, but it's...
I think it's definitely... For me, it's a mixed bag. I think growing up trans is a trauma. And growing up queer...
Growing up trans in that kind of environment, yes.
Yeah. Religion is just like a reflection of, in a lot of cases, not all cases, but for a lot of people that I talked to that night, it seemed to be, religion really seemed to be this thing that was like a extracted, like very strong, you know, like espresso, as opposed to like Americano, which is a little watered down. The espresso of every aspect of our society that wants us to repress the most like human parts of ourselves and really judge those parts and make us feel really guilty and want to hide and like there's something wrong with us.
It's the essential oil of shame.
That's so accurate. Oh my gosh. Oh, you should be a poet. We should have an open mic night at some point and just have like an hour where everybody like comes up with verses around the essential oil of shame. Excellent.
That has to be something. That has to be some kind of product name. I don't know what it is yet.
It should be a product.
Yeah. Or that's the name of our open mic night.
Oh yeah, the essential oil of shame. No, it's a great title. I love it. God, we got sidetracked again.
It never happens. I'm not ADHD.
Literally every single person in the queer community that I know in real life is neurospicy. Just to make that clear.
Yeah, that's another thing that can be trauma growing up.
Oh, yeah.
Around people who expect you to be...
neurotypical.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also to not have that recognized until like 40-ish.
Right. So growing up is trauma. Existing is trauma. Being born is trauma. Do you remember our first meeting?
Okay. When I first met you in person, I had known you for a while through the group chat, but only through the group chat.
Right. Our like trans group community.
Yeah. Shortly after I came out, I joined different online queer communities, and we were part of one of the queer communities, a trans queer community, and a lot of those people I didn't meet for 2 years or more.
Because that was during the pandemic.
That was during the pandemic, exactly.
Yeah.
When I did first meet you, I was in Seoul for the wedding celebration of some of our mutual friends from that online queer community. And while I was at their wedding celebration, which was really beautiful and really nice to see, really made me feel a little bit envious, honestly. I felt like I wish I had that, or I wish I hadn't been able to do those things earlier. You know, someday that might be possible. But in the middle of that, I met a lot of people, and I decided I want to meet Jay. And you were working.
I was working, so I couldn't actually make it to the wedding ceremony, which I was so sad about.
Right. You were working at a shop called Piuta.
It's a sex toy store I used to work at, and it actually happened to be right next door to the place that the wedding celebration was happening at, right? The bar.
Yeah, it was very, very close.
Very close.
So in the middle of that celebration,
Yeah.
we decided to take a walk, myself and a couple other people from that community, and come and meet you. Because we've been talking for a long time.
Yes.
So yeah, I saw you in your element at that time, which was actually like the last day that Piuta was open in that location.
Oh, shoot. Oh my gosh. You're right. It was the last day. It was my last shift at the store because of some things that had gone down with the building being sold and everything. And it was all like a big surprise to all of us.
Right.
And so I was kind of in a weird headspace, but trying to do my best to just be like, well, you know, I love this space. I'm just gonna do my shift. And, yeah. And so I remember talking about that with you all when you came to visit me.
Yeah, so I got to see you working and guiding people around, showing your expertise. And I'd seen that a little bit before on like a Zoom call, in a group Zoom chat.
Yeah.
But seeing you actually working while trying to interact with us in between was impressive. And then we did end up meeting for brunch the day after. So I was able to talk to you more the next day.
Oh, yeah.
And get to know you more.
Yeah.
In person, and talk about things that we both connect with and we both relate to.
Yeah.
I still remember some things from that chat.
Yeah. Totally.
Which was nice.
It was really nice.
We had vegan food that day.
Yes, I took it to my favorite vegan restaurant in the neighborhood. I think the food was pretty good. Like everything we ordered was quite nice. I also remember the conversation we had. The bits of it is like, you know, now kind of inextricably merged with how I think of you, how I think of your story. But we definitely shared a lot about like our upbringing, I think, and the things that we have experienced. And it was really nice because all three of us there were trans and non-binary. And I remember just feeling really safe with the both of you. And yeah, how open the conversation was.
It was very open.
Yeah.
We were discussing something about being neurodivergent and how difficult it is in Korea when things are not stated directly.
Oh, yes. It was about the like nunchi, like the high context culture of Korea. And when you're neurodivergent, sometimes you need things to be very clearly verbally communicated. And sometimes that's just not the norm. The expected cultural way to conduct yourself, socially interacting with people.
Yeah, exactly. And not for Korean community necessarily, but for my own life, I could relate to a lot of the things you were saying. So that was nice.
Yeah.
It was good to hear from another person and be like, oh, yeah, that is true for me too.
Right.
And in different ways, but I can understand and relate very well. We could always relate very easily, I think.
Yeah, that was nice.
I found you to be a very relatable person, and I already knew the other person.
Who was there?
I mean, I'd already met the other person that we were meeting with. But yeah, traveling together and spending time in Seoul, and then getting to enjoy brunch with you, all of that was a really great experience. That was actually only my second time out in feminine clothing.
Right.
In my life. That was my second weekend being able to get away from my home and go out and meet people.
Right.
I think that was last year. That was like last April.
Wow. It seems so much longer ago and also not that long ago. Time is so interesting. But yeah, I remember you probably saying something like that to me. This is all new to me and everything. And it's always interesting to me that because I've been in the queer community, or at least I've had some queer community around me for a bit longer, it doesn't always hit home for me when people say that to me, like what that actually means for them. But, you know, I'm glad it was a good experience for you. Yeah, I'm just glad. You seemed really excited to be out and to be like talking with other queer people, and
Right.
and it was nice to see that, you know?
It's just good being around people who understand and support you without having to explain almost everything.
Right, exactly. It's less explanation and more just sharing,
Yeah,
like mutually.
right. And connecting is usually pretty easy. We have some common things that we can talk about.
Yeah, some big, big common things. Exactly.
Yeah,
That you don't need to spell out to each other, which saves so much
Right.
energy and time.
it does. I've got a cat meowing.
Okay.
Tigey, please stop meowing. Just sit here. Come here. Come here, Tigey. Think you have food, don't you? Yeah, you have food. You have drink. What's the problem? Want me to hold you? Or go back here? Oh, just sit there. Look out the window.
When we met, you told me you had a child.
Yes.
Then subsequently, you know, like with the people in our queer community, the few of us that do like regular Zoom chats with each other, we've all gotten to meet her over Zoom.
Right.
And she seems so sweet and not super shy, just like a outgoing person, if my impression is correct.
Yeah, I think she's pretty outgoing and focused.
Yeah, and high energy.
Yeah.
And the things that you told us about her, like she's like really into building robots and doing taekwondo.
Yeah, she's been doing taekwondo for a long time.
Yeah.
Next year she'll go for the second level black belt.
Ooh, that's impressive.
She is really athletic, which is not something I can connect with, but I'm really happy for her.
Yeah.
And also, she does a lot of music. She plays clarinet, piano, and she was taking guitar lessons, but I think the guitar lessons had to stop at this point, but she's still kind of doing guitar on her own with YouTube.
That's awesome. So yeah, like she seems so bright and like motivated. And the way that, you know, I've seen you interact with her and her interacting with you, it was just so lovely to see. You just have a really nice flow together.
Yeah. There's this really lovely note she sent me a few months after I didn't mention before, but I'm separated from her mom. And she does still live there because of school and other things.
Yeah, with her mom.
Right. But I do still spend time with her whenever I can, as much as I can.
Yeah.
Around the time, maybe a couple months after I had left, she sent me this really nice note that said something about ignoring the haters and she'll always love me. And it was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, you know, that's what I wanted to kind of ask you about. Like, how has her reaction been in all of this? I know that, you know, from what you've shared with me, I've been so impressed with the way that she seems to grasp the gender identity, you know, the whole transitioning process, maybe a little better than your ex-partner does. And so I was wondering if you could, like, share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a moment where she hasn't been supportive. The whole time I've been out, and sometimes since I left, I've been going out basically 100% in more feminine clothing and sometimes makeup, depending on the day and the energy. And
Right.
B's always with me. My child. I'll call her B.
B.
B is always with me and always supportive and will hold my hand and walk down the street. And that's like really, really great for me. And I'm glad that we still have that connection and that she is in my life. And yeah, I love her so much.
Yeah. And it's so clear that she adores you. Every time that you tell me about her or like I see you two interacting, I think it shows a lot of how you've parented her for her to be such a loving and accepting and supportive human being, right? So I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm always impressed. I'm always proud.
Yeah.
Oh, there's an amazing thing. Last year, I think last July, I went with B to a kind of event in Busan. And it was people playing music and selling art. It was like a community day. And B had never met any of these people before, and I'd never met a lot of them. And before walking in, B mentioned that she could play piano. And somebody was like, oh, can you play piano for us? And without even thinking twice, B said, yeah, I'll play piano. And in front of that crowd, I don't know how many people, maybe 40 or 50 people, she played piano. And like I was crying.
That's awesome. Oh, really?
So proud.
Oh. Yeah, I can't imagine like having a child and then like seeing them just do stuff and with so much confidence. Especially in a group of people maybe you relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome. She has so much confidence. That's so cool.
She knows how to be herself.
Yeah, exactly.
That's important.
And that was something that pretty early on when we were getting to know each other, I feel like I was curious about what your dynamic with B was and how you saw yourself having an impact on B as a parent who's going through transitioning now. And one of the things that just came to me without you necessarily having to explain to me was that as a child growing up and seeing someone you love make choices that are true to who they are, even though it's not easy, even though there are obstacles, must have a positive impact on them. It's sending a message, right? It's sending a really, really strong message without necessarily putting it into words, how important it is to be yourself and to choose yourself rather than give in to expectations that will make you unhappy. And I don't know, it just kind of struck me. As a queer person, it is something you think about. If you are someone who is a parent or who wants to be a parent or has plans to be a parent, and you haven't really seen that happen around you before, you don't know what that looks like, then it's kind of something you think about, like how is this going to have an impact on my family, on my child? And I think there can be like some anxieties around it, understandably. At least like that's my perspective. If I ever imagine having a child or a ward of some kind in my life, then I do think about the fact that I'm trans and non-binary, and I'm like, what are they going to call me? Everything from like, what are they going to call me to how is society going to treat them or treat us, my family. So it's been really valuable to just observe you with B and how B's just processing everything. Not that I know it intimately or anything, but from what I can tell, that's what it is. You're showing your child what it's like to choose yourself. And just the importance of that, I think, is really important. And it's something that I wish I had in my life when I was a kid, rather than all the toxic cishet normativity.
Right.
Including religion.
Right. That is part of it. Trying to give something that's different from what we were raised with. And hoping for better for the next generation and the next generation.
Completely. Undoing that, unlearning and undoing the toxicity that we grew up with and limitations.
Right.
That's beautiful. Honestly, I think it's maybe one of the best things you can do as a parent for your child, right? Just to be that role model that we didn't have.
Yeah. I do wish that I had her in my life more now, but that's still a complicated thing.
Just to clarify, what is your exact gender identity? And when did you first have this inkling that you might not be cisgender?
Yeah, those were words that I didn't have access to when I was growing up.
Oh.
So when I was very young, I felt like I was not masculine the way other people were.
Because you were assigned male at birth.
Right. But I didn't have words to express that, and I didn't see people around me in my small community in Minnesota and in my church. I didn't see that kind of example. And I grew up in a time where people were really scared. Like there was a lot of gay panic around AIDS and everything, and religion generally frowns at any same-sex attraction.
Which, from my understanding, they conflated with trans people too, right?
Right.
Gay people and trans people in their eyes were like the same thing.
Right.
And they're both bad and shameful.
Right. And I didn't know about all the different possibilities at that time because I just didn't have the information available, but I had that feeling and I just didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I felt that maybe 10 or earlier, I'm not sure exactly. I was a very emotional but happy child. But then at some point I was told, oh, you need to stop crying and you need to man up, as it were. And then I kind of shut down.
Right.
But I remember telling my mom, like, I don't feel very masculine, but she didn't really have any understanding of that and just kind of shut down the conversation. So I do identify as non-binary, but much more on the feminine side of that, if there were a line connecting the two.
Yeah.
But there's not a line connecting the two. It's just what I experience.
We're all constellations.
Yes, we're all constellations around different places, and I'm just embers. As far as what I enjoy, I do enjoy a lot of things that are seen as more feminine as far as clothing and experience. And I'm still learning a lot of those things, and I'm experiencing a lot of those things for the first time that I wasn't able to experience when I wanted to.
Yeah.
When I was younger.
Yeah.
And I was finally able to start to understand that kind of life and see that representation early in the pandemic by watching YouTube channels and see other people and realize, oh, I relate to that and that hits me and that makes sense for me. That's what I've been feeling and avoiding all this time. And that was like kept as a box or a jar inside of me. Locked away, so I couldn't cry. I couldn't show very much emotion for a long time. Through my teens and 20s and 30s, it was all kind of locked away.
Right.
And then finally, around I think 39, I started seeing videos because I still empathize with people and I still want a better life for many people who have less. And I wanted that before I came out. So I watched a lot of more left-leaning content. And in that process, I did see some people who said they were non-binary or transgender. And then I started to understand what that meant. And I started connecting that with my own life.
Wow.
And then for being pansexual, I don't remember exactly when I started having feelings like that or attractions like that. But I think at the time when I first tried to come out, I tried to come out as bisexual because I hadn't heard of pansexual either.
Right.
And I was living in California at that point, and my sister was visiting me, and we were talking, and she has a lot of gay and lesbian friends, or at least more than I had growing up in the church. She's been able to escape that better than I was able to. She's been able to experience things outside of the church and religion much faster than me.
Right.
And I remember asking her about being bisexual, but this person that I thought was more understanding basically said some very early 2000s ideas about being bisexual, like, oh, I don't think that that's real, or a lot of people just experiment, or, you know, like those kinds of ideas where, oh, if somebody's bisexual, then I might be scared about changing in front of them. And
what do you mean? Wait, changing in front of them? What does that mean?
Like in the showers or being in public places.
If you're bisexual?
Right. If somebody is bisexual and they're in the same locker room together, my sister was saying that she was scared of that kind of attraction.
Oh, okay.
At that time. This was early 2000s, and a lot of the ideas around being bisexual were similar to that. Even if you were watching Sex and the City at the time, a lot of those stereotypes and a lot of those ideas were there.
Yeah, I mean, Sex and the City, like the gay best friend stereotype.
Yeah. That definitely shut down a lot of my exploration at that time into that identity and the idea that I could be attracted to more than one gender or more than one biological sex, as I thought about it then.
Right.
I was living in a place at that time that had a lot of gay people and a lot of LGBTQIA people in California. So at that point, I did see that lifestyle more, but I didn't connect with it, except that I was really happy when guys bought me drinks. That was kind of nice.
Can I ask how old you were back then?
This was in my 20s.
In your 20s, right.
Early 2000s was in my 20s, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm terrible with math, so I'm always going to be asking.
That's all right. No problem.
And also, being on testosterone, I don't know what it is. It makes me zone out a lot more than I ever used to. I was always pretty good at staying with whatever was going on. But these days, sometimes if I'm not careful, I just zone out. So I have to like ask follow-up questions just to clarify.
Yeah, sure. So I've been pretty aware of that attraction, but avoided it. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
For religious and social reasons. My parents expected me to get married. I didn't plan on getting married, but I did eventually get married.
In Korea.
In my 30s.
Uh-huh.
Early 30s.
Right.
To a Korean woman who I worked with at the time.
Right. Can I ask what brought you to Korea?
Yeah. Well, so that's also a little bit connected with church, but it's also related with the fact that I used to read a lot. And I became interested in seeing other parts of the world. And then I got my first opportunity to travel abroad with the church on a mission trip. And that gave me the chance to see different people in different cultures in a limited way. And for reasons that I don't necessarily agree with or respect at this point. But I was able to interact with people in other countries with other ways of thinking. And at some point, I thought that that was what I really wanted. I wanted to live in a place that was not America, and maybe live in several places that were not America. And when I heard about teaching English from a friend of mine taught English in China and told me about that. And so I realized, oh, that's something that I can do. That will allow me to live in another country. So I did that in Czech Republic first, and then Japan, and then finally in Korea.
I see.
And I've stayed in Korea a lot longer than I planned because I got married and had a child.
Yeah.
But I think overall, Korea has had some things that have been positive for me. I was able to live here and have healthcare and have some amount of safety and security.
Yeah.
And at that time, maybe enough money. Economy has changed and that's become difficult now, but at that time it was possible to get jobs for me. As a person who appeared to be cis and straight,
yeah, mask presenting person, yeah.
It was possible to get jobs very easily.
Yeah. I remember when I was growing up, I had a white mask presenting, most likely a cis man, American or Canadian, English teacher who came to my home, to our apartment, and I had like 3 other kids from my complex. We all had like lessons together with this one guy, and his name was Bob. I just remember like his beard and very like North American vibe. I mean, we were in Seoul, of course, but we were not like a huge, rich, privileged people. But even we were having those tutoring classes when I was really young. So I can imagine like this was in the 90s, I guess, but like not too far off from, you know, like 2000s. So even then, English teachers were in demand. So yeah, I can see how it would have been a good place for you to be at the time in Korea.
Yeah, at that time, there were a lot of jobs, and as a person presenting like that, it was easy to find jobs. And I was always a little bit surprised, actually, at how easy interviewing and getting jobs, how easy that was at the time. Because I didn't feel qualified for some of the things that I got jobs doing.
Right.
And now I do have a lot of experience, and I am more qualified. But now it's actually quite difficult, and it is a big thing. It is a big change.
Yeah. A large part of that, aside from the economy not being great, we have discussions about how our gender expression, how the way we present ourselves versus society's expectation of how they want us to look based on our biological anatomy, which they will never get to see anyway, that really affects our ability to get jobs, especially in certain fields where you have to meet people face to face like all the time. Would you agree with that? I mean, we've had conversations, but just to get your side of things.
Yeah, 100% I would agree with that.
It's really frustrating.
It has been difficult. I've done a lot of interviews more recently. And the jobs that I was able to get when I was early in my transition, those were more because I was able to cover myself in some way and present more neutrally.
Right.
But I don't want to do that. I can't do that. I'm not going to press everything into a shape that society wants.
Yeah.
It feels bad. It feels wrong.
Right. It feels wrong to pass. I just identify with this so much. You know, some people who don't have this experience, who don't know what it's like to feel dysphoric about your gender and the way other people perceive you all the time, just wrongly, they might listen to this conversation and think like, I mean, your livelihood depends on it. If it's about making money for survival, like maybe just suck it up and do it. Maybe what they're missing is that we have been sucking it up and doing it for the last few decades. And we can't do it anymore. It's just not something that, as somebody who's transitioning now at, you know, whatever stage of life you're at, we have been, like you said, putting it in a jar, all of who we are truly, for so long. And now that we're finally giving ourselves permission to let it outside of the jar and really allowing ourselves to be our full selves. And it's sometimes hard to know because there's still not a lot of conversation between, I think, cis people and trans people, honestly, about what it feels like to have to pretend to be something you're not 24 hours, like every second, every moment you're existing, to have to pretend even to yourself that you're not what you really are on the inside, how much energy that takes to do, right? It's like trying to hold your breath all the time.
100% masking almost all the time.
Yeah.
Even before I was aware, like I was miserable and depressed and I didn't really understand all of the reasons, but there were so many areas that were gendered that just felt wrong.
Exactly. And then you're also feeling like, wait, but am I just like crazy? Because nobody else seems to see the problem. So it must be me. And then once you do the really, really difficult work of unearthing, you know, everything, like, oh, I'm not crazy. I am this person and I've just been having to mask myself head to toe like all these years. Of course, it's so difficult. And now I'm actually going to not live that way anymore. And it's a scary thing to do, right? There's a reason we've had to mask all these years. And once you make that decision, you understand like all of this weight coming off of you and not having to hold your breath all the time, not in the same way. And it's actually really, I think it's like hard to express what it would take for us to have to mask again, even if it's to like get a job, to work so that you can feed yourself, because then you're again doing all of that stuff. You're spending a very significant portion of your life, you know, pretending to be something you're not. Again, when you've done all of this work and you've spent all this energy and money to find yourself. So it kind of almost, it's like defeating the purpose of having done the work, which in itself is already very hard. It's really tough, but I know that there are going to be people who don't really understand. So I think it's important to point out why it's not as easy as it might appear.
Yeah, I spent so much time not living and not being myself, and I don't want, it's not want, I can't do that anymore. And I want to show that I am just a person and that we are just people, and show that a trans life and being transgender are things that you can be, that this life is possible. And it's really not easy, but it's possible to have that joy. It's possible to have gender euphoria instead of having to constantly mask and be miserable and depressed.
Right.
It's something that is possible and should be possible.
Exactly.
We just have to find ways of doing that.
Right, exactly.
Which is still a struggle for me right now because I haven't been doing this for that long and I'm still figuring out how to make that work.
Yeah. You mean medically transitioning and socially transitioning?
Not just medically transitioning, but social transitioning, I'm mostly there. But being able to work and have money for things is a very big struggle.
Right. Yeah, and this is something that, you know, a lot of the trans community really struggles with. And I think it's probably not just in Korea, not just in certain cultures, it's like everywhere. And especially for trans people who don't pass as the gender that they identify as, or non-binary folks who just don't fit into, oftentimes the way we present just doesn't fit into society's binary expectations of what the two genders should look like. So, you know, I just do want to be clear about that, about, you know, how like the cost of not being yourself all the time, I think at a certain point becomes way higher than actually letting yourself be yourself all the time and not getting certain opportunities, right?
Yeah, thank you. That was important, and it's important to be clear about those things.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for a person who is not transgender to understand that, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's why, I want to have these conversations and to have them be shared. Anybody can listen in, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Not really truly terrible people who are not willing to learn. But yeah, just to share these stories as honestly as possible. Because if you don't know, then you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing this with us and with me.
And it's also possible for people to listen who might connect with it more directly and realize something that they'd been missing in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I do really think that, a lot of the times I'll be having a conversation with someone in the queer community, but even people I've interviewed for this podcast, they've told me, oh, I just never really saw myself as a queer person until I did. And it takes time. Not everybody just knows. We live in such a masked society that is really limited in its imagination, the mainstream society anyway, and is only willing to acknowledge very, very limited aspects of humanity. That it takes time for a lot of us to actually understand that, oh, I'm not just this, or I'm not this at all. And those times when we have those conversations, what also comes to mind is that, like, we'll say, if more people just had more exposure, more opportunities to understand what queerness actually can be, more people would be queer. Like, they just don't know. There are so many people who probably just don't know.
I agree with that. The agenda is not changing people. It is just living.
Yeah, the agenda is to free people to be who they are.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
If that allows people to be themselves.
Exactly. And we don't care if you're queer or not. We do believe that everybody deserves the true freedom to be who they are, genuinely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because not getting a chance to do that, it really can be the difference between like life and death for a lot of people. And the trans community knows this all too well.
Yeah.
Aside from your work situation, transitioning as a non-binary person in your 40s, like how has that impacted your social life sphere, just your social relationships, if it has?
I didn't have that many available social relationships before I came out.
Right.
Because I had slowly gotten isolated in my relationship with my ex. So a lot of what I had was online, and people who were online, either I kept them in my life or not. And some of them are very good friends and some are just passive friends. So that didn't have a major effect. It was nice to find out that some people are more supportive than I realized. Or as we were saying before, there were people who saw me coming out and were like, oh, I feel that too. Or I have a child who is non-binary. Things like that. So that was nice. I got to connect with people that way.
Yeah.
And after coming out and after about 2.5 years when I started going out, I was able to discover that I am a more social person. And my shell persona was really not, because it was constantly masking, like you said, constantly trying to be what was expected.
Yeah.
So always anxious, always uncertain, and not able to know what to be or what to do in social situations.
Yes.
There was a lot of social anxiety there.
Yeah.
And when I stopped masking and was able to be myself and understand myself, I was able to realize that, oh, actually, I really enjoy being out and with people and really connect with social situations and get energy from that. So I think overall, the effect on my in a social way is very positive, because I almost didn't have a social life before, except for a while. I think I had some board game groups, but even that had stopped at that point.
Right.
But even the board game groups, it was me trying to find people to relate to or be social with. I guess some jobs I connected socially with other workers, but not too often. And I've been separated for about a year and a half. I moved out when it became impossible to continue living together. I really tried to live with her.
Right.
And tried to stay in that situation. More for B.
I remember. Yeah. I did get to see some of like the very direct outcome of how it can unfold when you're already in a pre-existing relationship and you have a realization about your gender identity and you share that with your partner and they don't have a great understanding and, you know, there are other potential like issues in your relationship already. Yeah, just the things that can happen and how much of a toll it takes on top of everything else. You're trying to navigate all these other things that come with understanding that you're not cis and there's so much information that you have to research and take in. It's not like somebody's going to hand it to you. There are new communities you need to find and all this other thing. So it just seemed to me like such a stressful situation to be in, to have this other aspect that you had to navigate. The medical part, yeah, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of information gathering, and also like money. But to me, it seemed like your decision to really change your living situation and change your relationship dynamic and to choose what's best for you and your mental health. And it sounded like you chose what was best out of the situation that you were given. And that to me seemed like the most courageous thing. Not that there's like anything more or less courageous, whatever. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm in awe of like the strength that I'm sure it takes to get out of a relationship that's not working.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Previously existing issues definitely intensified.
Right. And as the queer community around you, like you share that with us and you said that like some of the advice you got from people in the queer community helped you.
Definitely. Yeah, there were people who helped me to realize that the situation was worse than what I had thought of it as.
Yeah, I think that goes to show the necessity of community, right? Of people who are safe and who actually do want the best for you and kind of have an understanding that comes from firsthand experience of the things that you might be struggling with and the kind of support you need.
Right.
So I'm so glad that you found us and that we found you.
Yeah, I'm so glad too. People to share the joys and the pains.
Yeah, exactly. What has been the most surprising part of your transitioning and what has been the most joyous part of transitioning? If you can pick, you know, something out of like the million things that must be happening.
Yeah. Any question with most is really difficult for an ADHD person, I think.
It really is, right? Yeah. I apologize.
No. I don't know if I can choose a moment. But I've had people in the community who have sent me clothing, especially, and friends who have sent me clothing where I was able to get previously loved feminine clothing that people just wanted to give me.
Yeah.
And then the joy of trying some of those things on and taking pictures and sharing them and getting positive responses.
Yeah.
That was a really big thing. It still is a really big thing.
Yeah.
Anytime I get to try on new things and people react positively, it feels really good.
Yeah. And they fit.
Yeah. I mean, I feel happy wearing those clothes and it feels good to me.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think, oh, wow, I'm great in this. But I get people who can say that, who can give that affirmation or validation that I can't always give myself because sometimes there is still dysphoria about certain things. Even where I am right now, it's still not entirely perfect, obviously. It's still a process. So that's one of the more joyous things for me. Being able to get those clothes, wear those clothes, get comments about them, and then go out in them as well. I've had times where the most fun thing that I was able to wear like this really white and light dress. And I went out in Daegu in this dress to a coffee shop, just walking around casually with a rainbow hair clip tying my hair back and rainbows everywhere.
Yeah.
And then to go from that, like just being out in public to a drag show that night in Daegu and have so many people come up to me and be like, wow, you look so great. And I feel shy when people say that, but it still feels really good.
Yeah, completely. Like for someone to compliment you on the way that you are choosing to present yourself, that feels right for you, like for the first time in your life. I mean, you know, like not always the first time, but really that can be a super new experience for a lot of us.
And understand each other. And I don't think I'd experienced that with anybody in my life.
Right.
So The surprising thing for me has been how easy it is to find support and understanding in the queer community, with people in the queer community. And the first few times that happened, it felt better than other relationships I've had in the past, better than friendships, better than romantic relationships, more understanding, more supportive. And that was a big surprise to me, that was possible.
Yeah.
And I would say the first time that happened, it was confusing on an emotional level because I didn't have that connection with my ex. And I got very confused about what are my feelings here? Is that the feeling of friendship, or is that a romantic feeling? It's really hard to understand that feeling. And I eventually realized that that's just how friendship can be. And in my opinion, that's how understanding and supportive friendship should be. And that's the kind of love that is possible in our community.
I love that. First of all, I love love. And what you're describing to me sounds really in line with what I've experienced personally as well. And also like love, it sounds like love. In the queer community, I've also discovered that exactly like you said, when I started to form relationships with other people in the queer community and experience the level of connection and understanding and empathy and support, I was really taken aback in some way. I think I was delighted. Love feels natural. Healthy love actually feels pretty natural because we all need it. And I was like really hungry for it too. I just didn't know it. And so now hearing you speak, what's coming up for me is how scared I used to be of connecting with people. And I never expected to be understood. I never expected to be accepted, just like being myself. And so I also, like you, didn't know this level of connection was possible with other human beings before I started meeting people in the queer community, and especially since starting to transition as a non-binary person, because I discovered the queer community before I actually started to identify as non-binary. So it's just been getting better and better. And I think it's not having to mask so much of yourself because you're surrounded by other people who can relate to your experience and will be understanding of your experience. That relaxes you, right? And it's the entire thing together. You're becoming more in touch with yourself.
Yeah.
And that allows you to be in touch with other people in a more authentic, genuine, relaxed way too. And I think about this a lot in our relationship as well. Like the last conversation we had was all about love. We were talking about where is that line between friendship and romantic relationship and all this stuff. Like, not that it really matters, but for me, having discovered this level of, wow, like I can actually connect to people in this way, that really expands my understanding of what's possible in human relationships. And different people can put different labels on it. And I think friendship does just fine. But also it feels, I don't know, even more than that. Like it doesn't feel necessarily bound by labels, To me, it doesn't really matter what label we put on our relationship. It just matters to me that we experience love together. That's what it feels like to me. I feel like I'm finally being allowed and allowing myself to experience love with other people without being afraid so much. And like, I love that we talk about it too, between us, like we have those conversations. And I hope to have more conversations around that too, because I feel like we're still at the beginning stages of our journey. At least that's how I see it. But yeah, that just resonates with me so much. Like, it's amazing. Because we both have religious backgrounds, I feel like we're maybe both familiar with that message of unconditional love that Jesus was supposed to be all about. And I think Jesus was all about that. It's just that some other people, who identify as Christian maybe don't really actually practice that.
Yeah, their understanding of love and how love works is very different from what I feel or think it should be.
Yeah.
Also with family, their version of love seems to be, the religious version of love is not necessarily supportive or understanding. It's just, we'll love you no matter what.
Yeah.
But their unconditional love means that some part of the thing that they're loving is something they think is wrong. Mm-hmm. And they're like, we'll love you no matter what. But the no matter what is a problem to them. They're just like trying to ignore it.
Right. This just makes me realize that the most unconditional form of love I've experienced in my life probably has been in the queer community. Our relationships are actually spaces where we can be unconditionally ourselves, and we know we're loved, and we know we're accepted, and we do the same for other people. So it's interesting to me that the group that is kind of marginalized and judged and like demonized in some cases by religion, which purports to be about unconditional love, at least Christianity does, is the one that actually, in practice, as far as I've experienced it, is the one that actually is about unconditional love. You know what I mean?
I do know. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I don't know if like people who point fingers at the queer community for like being a corrupting influence or, you know, being like mentally ill or whatever, being somehow damaged and not normal, like, I don't know if they see this, you know, that some of us actually get to experience what it means to have unconditional love.
Yeah. I think they don't see it that way.
Yeah. I don't think so either.
They just see some stereotype version that they think is all about physical pleasure and sex, and that's the only thing they think about. They think about how does this work and how does that work, and
yeah, how do parts fit into other parts?
Yeah, exactly. And most of the time, that's not really the most important thing. It's part of your life in limited elements.
Yeah.
Not constant.
Exactly. And there are asexual people who are sex repulsed in the queer community too.
That is entirely true too.
Yeah. All those, you know, like bigots are thinking about is just like anal sex. And I don't know what else they're thinking about. I feel like anal sex is a very big, big thing that people just can't stop thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, they should try.
I mean, if you're so obsessed with it, why don't you just do it? Get over it, you know? We're all adults here.
Yeah. Instead of just picturing it in your head every day, all day, just experience it.
Yeah, so worried about it.
Then
they need
you
therapy.
can understand.
Yeah. Or they need to go to PETA and there'll be two nice lesbian women there to explain to you why anal sex actually can be great for your intestinal and rectum health. So, you know.
Yeah, that was part of my first memory of you too. Like, you explained so much the first time you showed me around PETA. It was so great.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
You helped me pick out my first sex toy.
Yay!
Over Zoom.
I know. I gave you a whole tour over Zoom and you got the whole virtual shopping experience.
Yeah, virtual tour.
Yeah. And I was really glad.
With a very good guide.
Thank you. I was mostly really glad that you were willing to consider your own pleasure and just think about what you wanted as somebody who is transitioning, because a lot of the times that's hard to do. There are so many obstacles. It just makes me so happy when somebody's like willing to take their pleasure seriously. And I feel like we did that together. I was really glad to assist in that process. Yay. It sounds like the most surprising and the joyous part have a lot to do with discovering new ways to relate to the world, to other people, and to yourself. So is there anything else that you've noticed in how you relate to yourself that's been impacted or changed by your transitioning?
Figuring out how to deal with emotions that I had buried for so long. That was one of the major things that I had to understand and experience. Like, it was so good to let those emotions come out and be able to experience them again. But a lot of the things that I've experienced also involve some pain that I hadn't processed before. So learning how to cry and learning how to let the waves of sadness pass over, that's another thing that I learned in the process, another change that I noticed in myself. And it was explained to me by a mutual friend again about how those feelings can pass over you like a wave.
Oh, right. This is a person in our trans community.
Yeah. Understanding that the tears happen, and sometimes they're very close to the surface for me still, because I still do have a lot of things to process, and it's not really been that long. But letting those things hit and pass, letting them pass like water, has been a really useful thing for me. Yeah. And being able to cry is one thing, but knowing how to deal with those tears and how to process the tears is another thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, that resonates so much with me. It's definitely a new learning curve. I think actually not even just for queer people, but for a lot of people who grow up in this world that tells us that showing emotion is weak, it's bad, you know, you shouldn't let other people know how you're really feeling, especially if it's something seen as a negative thing, like sadness, sorrow, grief, anger, which you all experience. But a lot of us forget that it's actually necessary to express those things. And it really cuts us off from ourselves. And I think that's a really sad and unhealthy aspect of growing up for a lot of people.
That one's related to toxic masculinity as I experienced it.
Exactly. So learning to do that is really rebuilding that relationship with yourself. And personally, for me, I don't know how that process really began for you. I mean, it sounds like this person in our trans community, who I also know as well, they've given me some great advice on how to deal with the emotional roller coaster and, you know, just the changes that come with being on hormone therapy. And that's helped. But that's like such a new thing though. I'm like, wait, I'm allowed to acknowledge that I'm feeling sad, that I'm feeling scared, that I'm feeling vulnerable. And it's such a deep old wound sometimes.
And the way of processing those experiences change depending on the hormones you're on a little bit too.
I think so. I think that must be the case too. Like you're on estradiol. Am I saying that right?
I've always said it as estradiol.
Okay, right. A lot of people who go on testosterone actually find it harder to cry physically. And it makes sense to me that it might be different for people who are on E. Yeah. Wow. Like I didn't actually consider that specifically. But I'm sure, yeah. But I guess the point I'm trying to say is that also like the way I came about understanding my own emotions and like processing emotions, like the healthy way to process my emotions and actually feel them, which I also haven't been able to do before, was through having that close relationship with other queer people in the community who have shown me, like, who have held space for me and who have shown me that it's like, this is so normal. Of course you're feeling this way. We can be messy together. You know?
Very, very true.
You're not, you know, abnormal because you have emotions. The more I think about it, the more it's like, you know, that person told you to like just let it pass like water. Now I'm thinking like tears and emotions are exactly like any other fluids that are in our body or that pass through our body. Like if we don't let them pass, then we're gonna die, right? That's really not great for your health. So, yeah, it just makes sense. It just kind of made me laugh, though. Like, it's exactly like going to the bathroom or throwing up when you've had, like, too much alcohol. You've got to let out those toxins or that buildup of fluid. Otherwise, something bad is going to happen.
For sure.
Do you think that going through that process of becoming closer to yourself, maybe, that would be the way that I would put it?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And building, you know, closer relationships with other people. Has that affected the way that you see yourself as a parent or that you interact with B as a parent at all?
It's hard for me to know. But yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, that is very true. Because before I wasn't able to be completely present when I was spending time with B.
I see.
I still loved B, but I wasn't able to have the same energy or same ability to show happiness or excitement.
Right.
Happiness and excitement were also not that present.
Right.
So, yeah, I think B has even mentioned that.
Really?
That I was like more flat before and now it's better.
Oh.
And I've been able to do things with B that I wouldn't have considered before. Like B and I would paint our nails together and I would play with dolls with B and things like that, which I hadn't been able to do before. So that was also new and different. And also while reading to her, doing different voices and things, that was very exciting and new. So yeah, it has changed the way I interact and the way I parent. I think I always wanted B to be herself, but my ability to be myself makes a difference as well.
Completely, I'm sure. I'm happy to hear that, like truly. Because every child deserves to grow up with a parent who feels comfortable in their own skin and are present and are able to interact with them as themselves. and show joy. I think that's so important, and it's not something that all of us get. And that makes me think about how different so many of our childhoods could have been if that were the case, if more people grew up in a world where they were free to be themselves, including as a parent. So that's really wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, as somebody who has been on gender-affirming hormonal therapy for a little longer than I have, what, if anything, do you think is, I guess, the hardest to explain to cis people about being trans in general? And if you have actually at all found an effective way to explain or communicate. Yeah, asking some impossible questions, maybe.
Asking big questions. I do find myself having to explain a lot of things to cis people, but I don't know if I found like the key, like the best way of doing it or the best way of getting people to understand.
Right.
I have a habit of explaining and trying to say everything, all the background and all of the information, and then if the person doesn't get it, I feel like, oh, maybe I didn't say it fully enough. And so I try to add more information. And I don't think that that's necessarily the key. I think if a person wants to understand, they will. They'll be more willing to listen. They'll be more willing to find a point where they can understand or connect with what you're saying. If they are unwilling to do that, if they're unwilling to make the effort on their end, then maybe they just won't understand. And I think that's kind of an important thing to realize at some point.
Yeah.
That understanding is not always going to happen.
Yes.
And sometimes, another experience I've had that it's not entirely the same, but sometimes people will approach us as something that they see as a political identity. Instead of as people. So they already have an idea built up in their heads about who they're talking to, and they already have disagreements in their heads before we even start talking, and they project those disagreements onto us. And I've had that experience so many times.
Right. I'm sorry.
And I feel like I'm just having a conversation and just connecting with people, and then suddenly they get angry, and I'm like, what are you angry at? What happened? I thought we were just having a discussion, and there's suddenly, I don't know, some element of who I am that set them off, I think.
Because the reality of who you are doesn't fit into their expectation? Or...
Because of what they think about the trans identity and how it's seen politically in the US, in the UK, and all over the place. What they think about trans people using the bathroom, or trans people in sports, or all of these politically stated in controversy and in very exaggerated terms that are often not true. And they just put those ideas on just a random person that they just met.
I see.
And say, well, you are a trans person and you must think this. And I'm just like, well, maybe, but your understanding of this is based on...
fiction?
Whatever media you've consumed.
Yes.
Yeah. Whatever media you've consumed has colored your understanding, and we have to start at a point of mutual understanding.
Yeah, or at least...
using the same terms and same ideas.
Right.
Or don't assume that I think a certain way.
Yes, that's difficult to do on a good day, but also, like, not assuming is really difficult. And maybe it's like with any other marginalized identity, the challenge is that whoever you're meeting who isn't willing to just take you for who you are, like take you for the person in front of them, but they have all these ideas attached to your identity, that specific part of your identity, you're like not starting out on an even playing field. If they're coming into it with all these certain ideas, the most difficult part is getting them to drop their expectations, or just to communicate that you're a person first and all these other things are part of who you are, but it doesn't define who you are, and it shouldn't define the way that they see you. But oftentimes we all have preconceived notions of like what a thing is, rather than be willing to be like open to just talking and perceiving and listening. Is that in line with what you were saying?
Yeah, it is. It's completely in line with what I was saying, yes. And I feel like I've experienced that more strongly as a person who is out and transgender than before, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think I do this with cis people sometimes too. less so now, but before, like at the beginning of my transitioning, because so many of my cis friends said unintentionally hurtful things to me about my plans to have top surgery or like going on hormones. It was coming from a place of care and worry for my well-being, but we were all underinformed about this stuff. So I was really hurt by that. So like after coming out to quite a few of my close friends who were in the queer community but were like cisgender, I started to feel like cis people aren't going to get it. What's the point in, you know, really being honest about what I'm going through or where I am or who I am? But then, you know, that started to change just because over time I got to see that if people really care about you, just like you said, if they want to understand, then they will. You know, they'll find a way, even if it takes time. So I think having that experience helped me have some more hope. And I'm not like as guarded now. But before, I definitely had some ideas before talking with who I presume to be a cis-het person to be like, oh, they're going to ask me these questions. They're going to have certain ideas about me. So yeah, we all do it, but you know, some of them can be a bit more dangerous.
Yeah, I think in general, that experience for me hasn't been as much in the queer community as the non-queer community. And it's not constant. It's not every person I meet. So that does help. But there's enough of them to get stuck in my head.
Yeah.
And even like with my ex, her assuming before I even thought about it, assuming, oh, you're going to need surgeries and you're going to do this and this and this. I'm just like, I hadn't even thought about those things at that point, but she's just immediately come to this idea that, oh, you want surgeries and you want this and this and this. That pushed those ideas ahead that I hadn't been able to process yet.
Yeah.
So that also complicated things, I guess, and assumed issues that didn't even exist yet.
Yeah. Which in turn, I imagine, put more pressure on your relationship unnecessarily, really.
Right. So many people who never have any reason to experience or do anything that is related to your genitals. Right. Really, really wondering about your genitals.
Yes. Like, why are you so interested? Like, unless you're my doctor or you...
This is not going to affect you in any way.
Yeah. Unless you're going to be interacting with my genitals, you don't need to know. You don't need to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's understandable that people are curious because we're all curious about like other people's bodies, our bodies. You know, that's something that I felt a lot working at a sex toy store for a few years, is that because this is another really repressed part of our society in our education, as children, we're naturally curious about things and we're just cut off from being, you know, like that curiosity is no, it's bad, don't need to know. And like we actually do need to know.
Yeah.
And it would be so much better if we did know. And maybe people wouldn't be asking so many inappropriate questions now as grown humans, just making other people unnecessarily uncomfortable if we had had the opportunity to actually just have things explained to us and like we were able to become more comfortable with bodies in general, including genitals.
Say as part of education or something.
Yes, there's a huge lack of education around sexuality and the human anatomy also. There's a whole... other topic, but yeah, what I'm trying to say is that I can understand why people are curious, but there's also like social etiquette in how you interact with people.
Right.
And it would be helpful if people could just think, what would make me feel uncomfortable if somebody that I was meeting for the first time was asking me, or someone who just had nothing to do with my genitals? How would it make me feel if they were asking me about the exact status of my genitals or what it looked like or what it involved? Like, how would that make me feel? That's not a difficult thing to do.
Definitely experience. Yeah. It's happened not just once. You meet somebody for the first time and they're asking about what's in your pants. And it's just like, why?
I mean, are you talking about, you know, my wallet, my gum, mints, like what's in your pants? Why don't you tell me first? You know, that seems like... Yes. That seems like the socially appropriate thing to do. If you're going to be asking me about my genitals, why don't you tell me exactly in vivid detail that I didn't ask for? Tell me what your genital looks like. Then maybe I'll consider.
And which thing in your pants does it remind you of? Are your genitals more like gum?
Or this mood ring. Or this flower. It's funny when you actually get down to it and talk about it. It's just uncomfortable when there's that gap in understanding of like what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for us to ask each other.
Very much.
Yeah. And a lot of it is not like anyone's specific fault. It's just our society is not very well thought through.
Right.
In a lot of ways.
Right. And a lot of those things can be painful, like dysphoria inducing.
Oh, yeah, exactly. The consequences that people get hurt. So things should change. And, you know, really beginning with how honest we are with children, I think, so that we can reduce the potential harm that we cause to them and then they, in turn, cause to others when they grow up without all of this knowledge of things that we already should know. Don't ask people about their genitals when you meet them and it's a casual chat. Like, that's uncomfortable for everybody. Please. Mm-hmm. B will probably know not to ask complete strangers what's in your pants when she grows up.
I'm pretty sure she knows that. Yes.
Yeah, and that's all we ask of people. Just be a little considerate, you know?
Yeah, low bar.
What are you passionate about in life?
Well, a big thing that I have been thinking about and passionate about recently is I see Seoul and I see that it is possible to see people basically every day and to have open queer community that you can go and you can see people and there are safe spaces that are largely queer or with people who understand, and drag performances and more people who are just able to present and live as themselves honestly and openly. And that is not something that I see in Busan all that much. So one of the things that I've been discussing with my friend, my housemate, is how to have that kind of thing in Busan. So we've been discussing, I don't have the ability to do this right now, but if there are people around us who would want that kind of space, that kind of community, how to open a space that can be a queer space that is possibly open for allies, but is mainly communicated as a place where queer people can meet and drink coffee or bring their fur babies or show their art, sell something that they've made, meet other people, go and watch performances, things that don't have to involve drinking alcohol. Alcohol can be a thing that is available, but we don't have to have all of our meetings at night.
Yeah.
Late when it's mostly alcohol. Yeah.
Which is the case for a lot of queer events. Yeah.
Yeah. I would like more of that comfortable, just anytime, get together and be friendly and be able to talk like we are now, but have a space for doing this and talking to people.
Physically, yeah. And hang out, drink coffee if you want.
Yeah.
If you're into tea, drink tea. Yeah, basically like an offline space for the type of interactions we're having now.
And know that if you go into that space, there's going to be people there that maybe people that you know, or maybe people that you can meet.
Exactly. We were talking about this the other day, just having that, like maybe like a membership-based sort of thing where it's very affordable, and then you can have a space where people can come in and do like artsy stuff, hang out, and bring friends, and you could have events or workshops there, not just for nightlife things, but for just really create that community. So that sounds like a great idea.
This is something that I would really like to see in Busan.
Yeah.
And something that when I go to Seoul, it makes me want to be in Seoul, but I just don't have that ability.
Yeah.
And not everybody has that ability.
Exactly.
For me personally, because I have a child here.
Yeah.
But Seoul's also just not where everybody lives. And there should be more places, more communities.
Yeah. Completely.
That's not necessarily something that's going to happen, but it's not impossible.
I mean, it's good to have an idea.
I have ideas, yes.
It all starts from an idea, right? Keep dreaming, and one day we'll sip some tea at your... I don't know what you're going to call it. If you were to open that space.
I don't know either. That's something I haven't come up with a name for. I have all these names, but I don't have a name for that yet.
Essential oil of shame. But it'll be like maybe essential oil of joy or something different.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
What brings you joy? aside from everything we've talked about?
I think I did just say that Busan doesn't have as much of that ability to meet people, but still in the times that I am able to meet people at events or just by going to bars that other queer friends do frequent, it does bring me joy to be around people who I can talk to and we understand each other. And it doesn't have to be for an event, but still most of the time that does involve alcohol. There's not a problem with alcohol, but the constant presence can be an issue. And also I'm in a group that does tabletop role playing.
Right.
And that group is also all queer people, and we roll dice and adventure together. This is my first experience with that, so it's a new thing for me.
Wonderful. Excellent. That sounds great.
Yeah. So I feel like that's the more social version of gaming. It can be more creative and fun.
Totally.
And there are other things too. I do enjoy some things that may seem a little bit... Should I mention BDSM?
BDSM? Okay.
No, there's a lot of things to enjoy. I get joy from spending time with my housemate and from meeting people in bars or at drag shows when they do happen here. And when I'm able to go to Seoul and meet people there too, that's always great. Anything that brings more social opportunities and more experience into my life.
Yay! So happy for you. Wonderful, truly. When things get a little bit uneven, is there something that helps you center or ground yourself and brings you closer to peace?
But I guess the answer is largely the same. Being able to be around people. I don't do well alone. If I'm alone and I'm feeling down, that makes it much more difficult. If I'm alone and I feel like I can't be with other people and I forget that I can just send a message, I forget that it's possible to be in contact with people when I need them. The best thing for me is having the ability to talk to people or meet with people.
Got it. It's great that you have that awareness.
Yeah. Being alone is generally the worst thing for that. So being with people or having the ability to reach out to people helps me to ground myself.
Yeah.
Which sounds strange.
No, it actually doesn't. It might have sounded strange to me like maybe a year or two ago. But now it really doesn't. Now I also understand that joy and that feeling of feeling grounded in myself when I'm actually around other people and interacting with them, which was never the case before.
Right.
So I get it.
Yeah. Being around those other people reminds me that I do have joy in my life.
Right.
And that joy helps to chase away some of the lower, more difficult feelings.
It's so great that we're learning these new skills of like, oh, wait, like maybe I need someone else's company right now. Oh, maybe I need to reach out right now. And then actually being able to do that and to just allow ourselves to have that in our lives, I think is awesome. It sounds like for both of us, it's something that's happened since we've started transitioning.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Or at least since we've discovered the queer community. So... so much love. This is great.
Love, love, love.
What are you, if anything, most excited about these days?
I don't have something that's happening anytime soon, but it does excite me to see B growing and B becoming more and more the person that she will be. That is a very exciting thing still for me.
Right.
To see who B is now and who B is becoming. That is exciting to see that this person that I've been able to be a parent to is becoming, I think, a good person and a very talented and caring person.
Yeah.
And I'm always proud and excited to see what she does.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. What's your favorite drink?
My favorite drink.
And this is the most important question, as you can tell.
This is the most important question. Oh no. I don't want to fail the most important question. I guess we have to say it's coffee. Coffee is the most important and the best drink. It's always there for you.
It's always there for you. That's true. All right, black?
Yes, definitely black coffee and generally as strong as possible.
Do you usually take it Hot or cold?
I like both, but like you were saying, I'm better in cold weather. In hot weather, I kind of have to do iced coffee. And even in the winter, sometimes it's not that cold for me, so I still do iced coffee. So I guess I more often drink cold coffee than hot coffee.
Okay.
Hot drinks are nice, but it's just never cold, so I don't need a hot drink.
Hot drinks are nice, but they're never cold. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this love with me and with our listeners. I hope we get to hear from you again. And if, somebody listening to your story has more questions or comments, feedback, something that they want to communicate through the podcast with you, would you be willing to, ask any questions that they have? What am I saying?
Yeah.
Further engagement through the show.
Yeah, further engagement is possible. Very possible. I hope that people will do that, honestly.
Yay! So you heard it, folks. Embers is very open, very kind, as you can tell. And I'm really glad that I met you and that we have been friends for a while. But I feel like lately we have been having more in-depth conversations. So I'm kind of looking forward to having more of those with you. And being in community with you.
We've had really great talks, and this is another one.
Yeah, this is another one, exactly. It's just available for other people to listen in on as well. So again, thank you so much for sitting down with us at the Coffeeshop AU, and I'll talk to you next time. And say hi to B for me.
I'll say hi to B, and everybody take care.
Take care, Embers.